Hello to all and to all the participants to this webinar, and thank you for joining us. I'm Xavier Pasco. I'm the director of the Fondation pour la Recherche Stratégique, a French think tank based in Paris and devoted to analyzing security and defense issues. And I'm very happy to welcome you for this web conference organized both by FRS and Sogena, Euronaval organizer and our partner in this event. The topics that will be addressed today is export markets and strategic partnerships, and it will lead us to address particularly structuring issues for exporting states and for exporting companies, whether the latter rank as prime contractors or system suppliers and equipment manufacturers in the supply chain. So as part of their major procurement market, various states are increasingly seeking partnerships and cooperation, as you all know, and now and more than before, exports and partnerships therefore go hand in hand. And the ability to forge stable and lasting cooperation and partnerships relations, intergovernmental and inter-industrial, has become a determining factor of competitiveness and effectiveness in this export activity. So to better understand this evolution, I'm very happy to benefit from three different point of views today. One from the state, another one from a prime contractor, and another one from a supplier. We have with us, and thank you for this, Thierry Carlier, representing the French Procurement Agency, DGA, and Director of International Development. We also have Massi Begous, thank you for your being here, Senior Vice President International Industrial Development from Naval Group. And we have Vincent Carrié, thank you also for being with us today, CEO International Subsidiaries Issartel, who is an SME specialized in complex hydraulic, mechanical, and pneumatic systems. So he will give us a view from his perspective. So I will be very brief, but before handing over to Thierry Carlier as a first speaker, I remind the participants, all of you, that you can ask questions through the chat, and we'll try to answer them during the last quarter or 20 minutes, let's say, and maybe more, during the discussion. So each of our speakers will present you their views, and we will have a time for discussion at the end of this session. So please, Thierry Carlier, I give you the floor, and thank you for giving us your views on these aspects.
Thank you very much, Xavier. And first of all, I want to thank Sogena and FRS for your kind invitation to participate in this digital Euronaval seminar. Of course, it's a pity not to meet in person today, but of course we have to cope with the consequences of the crisis. And really thank you for the efforts of having maintained the Euronaval exhibition in this format, because I think this will also enable us to have quite fruitful exchanges despite the current pandemic situation. So today, really, it's my distinguished pleasure to, let's say, address the strategic partnerships in the naval field. As I hope you will recognize from our today's exchanges, and especially for France, definitely a key domain where we develop strategic partnerships over the long terms. It's definitely not only an export topic or issue, it's far more than that. And I will try today to highlight this in a few examples. So first of all, perhaps before diving into the naval domain, I will just try to highlight why strategic partnerships from French perspective. What do we intend to do as governments when we do develop this kind of, let's say, overarching tools? And then, of course, I will try to give some more naval oriented examples, which, as you will see, really belong to the, let's say, the biggest extent of the strategic partnerships we have developed in the recent past. First of all, in our world, which is exposed to multiple kind of threats, where the instruments of security and stability are challenged, France massively invests in multilateralism with our allies and partners. This is why France has developed over time regional strategies, which are built on partnerships in order to jointly develop and defend our interests with our partners. Of course, among these, we do have multilateral and bilateral European cooperations and also a transatlantic relationship. These, I would say, are the two first pillars which do sustain this kind of approach. But we also have another one, which is about regional bilateral partnerships, which are, let's say, often based on intergovernmental overarching agreements, which are signed at the highest level and which really do contribute to grant and to develop these common interests with our partners. So in the field of defense, this relationship do convey on the field of common engagement on long term and really trying to reach operational and capability-based shared objectives. Of course, to this regard, our strategic partners, so the governments, the states with whom we have chosen to develop strategic ties, have to be governments, states with which we do share common values, common views on what is the international strategic context and how we can develop a community of interests in the field of defense and security. Of course, having strategic partners, it does enable us to be stronger together because it will give us more influence together, once again, on the international scene, more leverage on regional balances, and offer to both our partners and us new possibilities for our forces. Therefore, it is really a powerful channel of shared influence. It's crucial also for sovereignty, and you know how sovereignty is important to France, and that is also why we do want to develop it with our strategic partners, and therefore it contributes to the state security, of course, France's ones, but also, once again, the one of our partners. So let me now do some focus on, let's say, strategic partnerships based on armaments. Of course, when it comes to armaments, our export policy is at stake. And as you know, once again, first of all, our French export policy is just not only about selling equipment. It goes far beyond that, because first of all, it is the expression of our political priorities, of our political will to develop this kind of ties. This is why when we, from French perspective, we do take the decision to export a weapon system and to develop these ties with our partners, it's really, we try to embed different kind of aspects, which is, we do think, some kind of a genuine approach. First of all, the aim is to develop interoperability between our forces and the forces of the strategic partner. And of course, we try to develop this interoperability by providing the right equipments, but also providing common training, common support. And of course, this is why, let's say, beyond the commercial contract itself, as you will see later on, we have lots of aspects also coming from our forces and from the government in order to, let's say, to give heart to this strategic partnership. The second item is really to provide a long-term view, a long-term support, of course, through life support of the equipments, which are going to be partners, but also, because you perfectly know this is definitely a very important aspect for the current partnerships, and it matches with the needs of our partners to develop their sovereign capabilities. Of course, may it be military capabilities, but also industrial capabilities. We do think that over time, several assets that we do propose have made France a reliable, desired, and appreciated partners. First of all, it is a completeness of our DTIB, Defense Industrial and Technological Base, which is supported by various centers of excellence, covering the full range of equipment and technologies. Of course, this is a guarantee for our partners to be given a great independence and the capability to have access to highest quality at the world best standards. Of course, moreover, there is also the extensive operational experience, which is the one of our armed forces in the field, which also does the credibility of what we can call, of course, our combat-proven kind of equipment. This is a major axis, and for the partner, acquiring French weapon systems also does give an access to this operational expertise, as I was explaining before, training together, but also to some extent, if this is possible, operating the systems together. So these are the characteristics of the genuine partnership we do offer to our customers and partners. And the government support, so I'm going to give a few details, can take different forms to be flexible and to definitely match the needs of our partners. Of course, to this regard, DGA, Direction Générale de l'Armement, plays a major role because we have, if you will, a key status, being a key stakeholders, making the bridge between the industrial and the operational world in France. So we do have an experience as a smart buyer for the forces, because we are in charge of delivering the right equipment in the right times. And we have also the role to ensure that we do keep over time a sustainable DTIB. So we do cover the whole scope of the programs. So we do share experience. We also can help the partners in terms of defining the military requirements. We can conduct tests, qualification campaigns. We can also offer official quality insurance. So this support definitely aims at granting the same level of involvement to the partners as we do have for national programs. So the French position on exports, we do think is adapted to the, let's say, the partners' need. And of course, we do know that in actual export markets, this is a challenge because our partners, and they want to have the benefit to get more and more government support in order, let's say, really to bring all these governmental assets beside the relationships they do have, which is also a good thing, with our industry. So to this regard, government involvement has become a discriminatory factor to win against the competition. To this regard, in order to be flexible, we have implemented new kind of legal tools in order to materialize this governmental support. This can be, on the one hand, agreement, which then will be linked to the commercial contract between the vendor and the partner. But it can also go to some extent to government-to-government contracts and government-to-government intergovernmental agreements. For instance, this is what we have developed so far. It's not in the naval field, but we have new potentialities also to this regard. But in the land domain with Belgium, we have developed a full scale of partnership with a G2G contract where the foreign government gives DGA a mandate in order to place the contract on its behalf with industry. So we can develop now this tool for all kinds of domains. And with Belgium, for instance, this has enabled us to develop, let's say, really a full capability convergence between both armed forces. Now I'm going, of course, to expand to the naval domain. Of course, a big increase in terms of investments has been noticed also in the naval field. This is definitely linked with the fact that the deployment of military capabilities at sea and therefore an increased level of naval threats has led our partners to develop a new naval-based solution where, from French perspective, we think we can bring support and also offer new possibilities. This market, this naval, military naval defense market is very competitive. France has become a world leader thanks to this diversity of the systems we can propose on the full spectrum in the field of military system, also due to the technological maturity of the solutions we can provide, their performances, and their reliability. I think a paramount example to this regard is the figures, the export we had last year, where the naval domain really had the biggest share, that it reached almost a half of, let's say, our total export sales. It's a very big increase in comparison with the previous years. What we can do, let's say, also in terms of industrial technology, covers also the whole spectrum of what can be expected by the customers and partners. And of course, I will dive into some examples of partnerships, especially in the submarine fields later on. As I said previously, on the operational level, the French Navy is definitely in a position to provide common training, common operating of the systems. And I think that the qualities of, let's say, our crews is fully recognized and acknowledged all over the world. So really, just before giving these examples, what I wanted to sum up in a nutshell, it's not only in the naval domain, but the fact that we are proposing long-term partnerships which do go far beyond, let's say, only commercial contracts and commercial relationships, but which do expand to all the spectrum of government-to-government partnerships, maybe in the operational field, maybe in the technical and program management field through the support of DGA, are somehow the trademarks of what France can provide, and which I think does find its best examples within the naval field. So now I want to give very shortly 3 examples of what we do already did in the past. And of course, I think this will also rely to the examples which are going to be given to my colleagues later on during the panel. First example of what we did in terms of a naval, very big extent, government-to-government partnership is Brazil. Brazil is our main strategic partner in South America. Our partnership goes back to 2008 through an intergovernmental agreement, which does cover production of 4 Scorpion submarines for Brazil, the construction of a full shipyard and a naval base in Itaguaí, near Rio, and the deliveries of heavy F-21 torpedoes and anti-torpedo countermeasures. This covers the full spectrum of transfer of technology for design and production of the submarines. It also gives the support for the conception of a nuclear submarine, nuclear propulsion, but of course excluding the nuclear reactor with respect to our international agreement. So definitely this is a very long-term partnership. It's been 12 years now, and it have achieved very significant results, because the first submarine, which is named the Recherche, was launched almost 2 years ago and has now begun its sea trials. And of course, a big fault of this governmental partnership is what is achieved at operational level between the two navies, the Brazilian ones and the French Navy. So the French Navy supports the Brazilian Navy by providing technical and operational support. We have French offices which have been settled in Rio and which are also training the Brazilian crews, and we had some people coming from the Brazilian Navy in Toulon. What I want also to highlight in the frame of this partnership, and I think it's quite an interesting example. In fact, it's 2 ways. That is to highlight that Brazil also does help us in our national programs, because we have, for instance, Brazilian welders, which came from this Brazilian program, which is named ProSub, and which are involved in the production of our Barracuda program in Cherbourg. Then I will give 2 examples, very significant as well, in the Indo-Pacific region. Indo-Pacific region is key to France because the stakes of its stability are crucial for international security. This was noted in our Defense and National Security Review, and perhaps you may know that France was the first country to develop almost 1.5 years ago an Indo-Pacific strategy. Major challenges have to be overcome in that region, which presents a huge economical growth and an essential trade flows for Europe and France. Of course, the environment of this region does reveal important kind of threats, which we want to jointly face with our partners in order to contribute to the stability of the Indo-Pacific region. For this, we have chosen 2 major partners in the region with which we have developed very important ties and which do find very big examples in the field of armaments as well as strategic partnerships. These are India and Australia. So when it comes to India, India has been France's major military partners for several years. It was France's first customer for the last 10 years, and India did sign with us a strategic partnership more than 20 years ago. It was in 1998. India is looking forward strengthening, developing its strategic autonomy. I think all of you know this initiative, which is called Make in India, and there was also recent developments of the Make in India initiative, which has been announced by India earlier this year. And France naturally supports this objective. And I think the program, which I'm going to briefly mention, was really one of the first major one, being an example of the make in India. It goes back to 2005. So it's about Scorpion submarine. And so France has definitely shown its ability to support the acquisition of national production capability. To this regard, I think that we do have contributed to the construction of a high quality industrial base, which is equipped with unique specialized infrastructures. So this program at that time was quite a newness. It was a challenge. We had never realized it before with such a high degree of technology transfer, of production license for such a complex type of platform, and really starting from the very beginning of the program, from the first submarine. So these submarines, they are assembled in India by a public shipyard, which is called MDL, with the support of Naval Group. So we aimed at reaching a highly ambitious production rate for one submarine every 9 months. The first one has been operational since 2017. The second one last year, and now the third one is proceeding its sea trial. So therefore, I think it's quite a successful program. Last example is Australia. So Australia chose the French company Naval Group to produce 12 regionally superior oceanic submarines. And I think that this is the biggest extent of the strategic partnership we can actually develop. Of course, the relationship between Australia and France goes back to a very deep historical background, back to the First and Second World War, and a strategic partnership was signed and bound the two countries since 2012. After the release of a white paper in February 12, 2016, Australia decided to establish a major partnership with France, choosing Naval Group for the replacement of its Colin submarines. So the Naval Group short fin Barracuda has been selected for, I think it's a very big, of course, extent of contracts, and French government is definitely supporting this contract with an overarching intergovernmental agreement which has been signed 4 years ago. The first contract between Naval Group and Australia entered into force 4 years ago. Then a framework partnership was developed in order to cover the whole program. It's called the SPA, Strategic Partnership Agreement, and it was signed in February 19. The 12 submarines are going to be built in Australia. The aim is definitely to maximize what is called, it's not even the Australian content, it's the Australian industrial capability, in order to reach at least 60% of the submarines to be built in Australia. The design is actually in progress in Cherbourg, and it will be transferred to Naval Group Australia, a subsidiary which has been created by Naval Group definitely to this purpose. Actually, it's employing 200 people, and this is going to expand to up to 1,800 people during the production phase. The aim is definitely to provide Australia with a full design authority capability for sustainment of the boats. Naval Group is of course, very committed to this very challenging program. It does currently employ 900 people in France. And of course, this figure will keep growing during the production period. From DGA side, I think, to be frank, we have definitely opened the books to Australia, definitely to share, to gain a return of experience from both sides. I think it's very accurate, especially in the current phase we are of our Barracuda national program, because the two programs, they are very close. Barracuda, so the Suffren, is currently undergoing its sea trials. So it does give us a huge opportunity with Australia, and to have, of course, the Australian FSP program having benefit of what we are currently doing. So to this, we have within DGA a team of 6 full-time people devoted to the program, but also numerous experts, especially from the Barracuda program, who are contributing to the sharing of experience with Australia. Therefore, this FSP program with Australia, I think it's not a secret, and you know it through all the press articles we can witness. It's the heart of our current relation with Australia. It's a driving force because it does cover all strategical, military, and political aspects. So we do think that this is going, of course, to be the cornerstone of our relationship with Australia in the decades to come. I know I've been too long, but so I'm going to stop here. I just try to give you really what is when we do speak about strategic partnership. What is the extent, the full spectrum of what we can provide, and why, especially in the naval domain and in the submarine fields, which are of course very sensitive and very complex programs, how we already demonstrated how we can manage the full spectrum of these partnerships with our allies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carrié, for, I would say, completely setting the stage of this complex issue and multifaceted issue. I think we will come back during the question and answer session to different issues you've mentioned, and you might be able to complete, by the way, some aspect you wanted. I will now give the floor very quickly to Mr. Begous for another perspective on this. So please, Mr. Begous, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier. I will talk first about our approach to industrial cooperation, and then draw lessons learned from our experience. But first, a brief introduction on what Naval Group is doing, not much about our products, which are reasonably known, but about a strategic positioning and our DNA. So Naval Group is first and foremost a designer, integrator, and service provider for highly complex systems. We say that generally a nuclear submarine is about 1 million parts and equipment which have to work together safely in a fairly hostile environment. So industrial cooperation on those complex systems is more than just transfer of technology. Second, we are a company whose first shareholder and client is the French government. It means that industrial partnerships are often built, and Thierry just explained that, on the foundation of government-to-government partnership. It has another implication, of course, is that when we commit ourselves, we also engage the French government. Last but certainly not least, our systems are highly sensitive to a customer's sovereignty in the technologies and in their operational use. So therefore, we see ourselves as much as sovereignty enablers or sovereignty enabling partners as naval systems providers. So with these elements in mind, I would like to elaborate on why and how we build and develop international industrial partnership. First, I would like to come back to the title of this conference, which refers to export. Export in the sense of producing something in a country and selling it abroad is now the exception rather than the rule. The rule is industrial cooperation and transfer of technology. As most of our customers are navies, which are in a position to operate highly complex defense systems in a military challenged environment. We talk about major navies. So those customers consider industrial and technological sovereignty as a natural consequence of their national and diplomatic sovereignty more and more. So on partnership, if we look back on the most complex systems we design and built or help building and developing for Singapore, India, Egypt, Brazil, and now for Australia, it is not a simple government support we enjoy, as Thierry said, but the fact that those countries have prior strategic partnership with France, and they enjoy France as a strategic partner. This is why we can do actual technology transfer. This is why when we say that we support the buildup of a sovereignty by our client, without this country-to-country tie-up, this would just be honestly a marketing gimmick. And like many of our competitors, we would in reality keep almost everything at home. On the industry side, of course, we don't go alone. We bring with us, and not only the large tier one, such as Thales, Safran, and BDA, but more important, our suppliers, most of which are SMEs. Without their support, we cannot guarantee an effective transfer of technology. In fact, what would the reality of sovereignty be if the core technologies, talk about sensors, weapons, would come from countries which would not allow such transfer of technology to happen? Then it will just be a transfer of production. It means that in order to be really effective, we have to work not only with shipbuildings and integrators, but also with the whole supply chain, from design offices to equipment or component manufacturers in France and in the countries. And this is necessary both to maximize the added value in the country, which is, of course, a very important requirement, but maybe more important, to allow through life support by the local ecosystem. Of course, TOT is a two-faced coin. I've talked about one aspect, but I'm sure you have another one in mind, which is the risk of technology dissemination and subsequent risk loss of technological edge. Now, this approach, the approach we have, would not work in the long run without massive investments in R&D, and not only from Naval Group, but also from its whole ecosystem. We invest in R&D, we enjoy R&D funding from the French MOD, both in the frame of R&D programs, but also, and this is maybe more important, in the frame of large naval programs for Marine Nationale. In other terms, we can do TOT and keep our technological edge because our first customer is at the very top level of technological requirements. And because our mission is to support the sovereignty of France. So although at first sight it might sound counterintuitive, it is because we play an important role in the French sovereignty that we can effectively and efficiently support the development of industrial sovereignty of our clients on the wider market. So what are the lessons learned based on our experience? First, which is about 25 years old now, there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Every client has different requirements. The extent of required TOT varies a lot from one country to another. Also, local capabilities are extremely diverse, both in quality and quantity. So the first lesson is that we have to be adaptable, but also engage in discussions with our clients and our French authorities as early as possible to draw the most cost-effective solution. Second, and it's also as much a lessons learned for our clients, is that keeping an industrial ecosystem which has been developed at a huge cost in the frame of one large program is a huge challenge. As defense acquisition cycles are much longer than traditional industrial cycle. So the second lesson is that the best way to keep a country's ecosystem alive and at the required capability level is its involvement in through-life support activities. Now, let's be clear about that. This is a necessary requirement, but by no means is it sufficient. This ecosystem must be kept by the government through the involvement in other projects, R&D, production, etc. This is why we believe that developing and nurturing such complex capabilities is better achieved through a national champion approach, at least for the most sensitive technologies. Third point is on offsets. Obviously, all foreign OEMs have huge difficulties to fulfill their offset obligations in countries where they are either very heavy or very strict or very cumbersome. There are as many regulations as countries. And it is becoming an issue not only for OEMs who have difficulties fulfilling them, but also for countries which, by this way, do not get the right return, which is building a real industrial defense base. So more and more, we see our clients shifting from offsets to local content on the program itself, which, in our opinion, is the best solution. Although it's quite challenging. It's more difficult, but it's to be in the long run. It's really the best solution to nurture the industrial base. The last point is building an effective partnership is made easier with a real industrial local presence. Notwithstanding travel restrictions due to COVID, which are creating a lot of disruption, but which will disappear one way or another. It is difficult to keep the momentum of industrial partnership 5,000 or 10,000 kilometers away. So local rep offices are fine, but they're not enough when you have a large program to run. So a local industrial capability is a very valuable asset. Of course, what I said about the local ecosystem and keeping it alive is also true for us. So as you've understood, I mean, partnership is at the core of defense export, with the limitation of that word export, which I said in the beginning. But such partnerships, in our views, are at all levels. With the geopolitical situation being what it is, it's first, there is the political level, government to government. There is the operational level, Navy to Navy, and industrial, and also more and more often academic. The industrial component, as I think I've said, is not independent from the political one. And we at Naval Group endeavor to work at every and very early stages, as I said, with our authorities and the client authorities, and the whole industrial ecosystem, be it European or local. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Begous, for this very interesting perspective also, and I think we'll have time to discuss also several aspects of it. I will now give the floor to Mr. Carrié, who is representing an SME, is a high performance in its activity, and I will give you the floor right now.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will show you a couple of slides. The idea is to give the industrial SME standpoint on the export markets and strategic partnerships. So, in a nutshell, our company its main activities are development, manufacturing, and maintenance of hydraulic, pneumatic, and mechanical high-tech systems. We mainly work in the naval and nuclear energy sectors, and we are the typical French defense SME, as we employ 85 employees, and our turnover is around 15 million euros. We work according to our customer specification and drawings, and we provide the total quality compliance of the equipment we manufacture for our customer. And in terms of international added value, what we offer are a turnkey solution for transfer of technology and local content, and focused on the final customer, industrial sovereignty. So Issartel submarine experience. So in the defense area, we are very focused on the submarine business. We have been acting in this market for about 60 years. We've been involved with our historical partner, Naval Group, since the very beginning of the SSBN program back in the 60s. And we've been involved in all the national and international program. And talking about the international program, we've been involved for both the program that involved transfer of technology, as well as the one that involved manufacturing and classical exportation. So talking about Issartel, or some numbers about our equipment, you can find them on board about 40 submarines, which are operated by 7 different navies, and we sum up about 7,000 different part numbers. So it involves a very wide range of equipment that goes from steering gear, seawater houses, any kind of valves, specific valves that you can find on board the submarines, air panel, and then all kind of high pressure system. So now talking about some business cases, I will start talking about Brazil. So I will talk about the context, the business model that we choose for this country, and the accomplishment of our company there. So the context, as my colleague previously said, it was the program, which involved the manufacturing and transfer of technology for 4 Scorpion-class submarines and 1 SSN. And there was a very strong requirements from the Brazilian Navy in terms of transfer of technology and local content. So what was the business model that we choose? So I'm talking of something that happened 10 years ago. So we, after a very wide and deep market survey, we decided to create an industrial subsidiary in Brazil from the scratch. We recruited Brazilian employees with a strong technical background in similar industrial sectors. We trained them in France, and we've provided technical assistance in Brazil from our back office in France. We made strong industrial investments in the country that were focused on the key assets of the submarine equipment for manufacturing and maintenance purposes. And we also involved widely the local supply chain. So we made a very wide and extended sourcing campaign. We qualified and we developed the local supply chain all along the execution of the program. So talking about the accomplishments, now we in 2020 we managed to manufacture about 10,000 equipment locally, with the same level of quality that we provide in our mother company in France, and the Brazilian subsidiary is fully industrially and technically autonomous for both manufacturing and through life support in Brazil. Now I will talk about the Australian business case. So it's in the framework of the Future Submarine program, as well as the Brazilian Navy. The Australian Navy has very strong and ambitious requirements in terms of transfer technology and local content. So for Australia, our business model was a little bit different. I would say for two main reasons. The first one is that the reality of the Australian market is different from the reality of the Brazilian market, and secondly, we went to Australia after the Brazilian experience. So we learned a lot from the Brazilian experience, and we are trying to use all that we learned through the Brazilian ProSub program to add more value to the Australian submarine program. And so in Australia, we created a 50-50 joint venture with a local Australian partner called H.I. Fraser. So I guess my Australian fellows know them pretty well. Why we decided to work with them is because we have complementary knowledges, and they also have an existing industrial structure that is capable of absorbing and capitalizing the transfer of technology. In terms of accomplishment, so we obviously we are now at earlier stage of the program that what we are now in Brazil, but we're carrying out a strategic business plan that is based, like I was saying, on all the lessons that we learned from the Brazilian experience. And one very important aspect of what we did is that we've been involved at the very early stage of the program, at the bidding phase of the program, which gave us the time to work properly. We launched this year a sovereign supply chain qualification plan, which intention is to start at a very early stage as well, start involving all the local companies that might be involved in the chain of value of Issartel products. And what we can say at the time being is that if we follow this strategic business plan and all the lessons learned from the previous program, we will be able to build a strong and long-term sovereign industrial capability in Australia. So now I will try to share a little bit about the lessons that we learned from all these experiences. So the first thing that I can say is that when it comes to transfer of technology or local content, you need to be humble. I'm talking on all perspective, but as a French SME, I think we as French SMEs we need to be humble, and we can't never forget that even if we are the technical knowledges provider, we will always learn a lot from our customer, partners, final user, and supply chain. TOT is above everything a human experience, and when we talk about defense projects, and moreover when we talk about submarine projects, it's very long term. So you need to have this long-term vision in all that you do and all that you say. Then a very important key aspect to make this happen, to make a sustainable transfer of technology and local content program happen, you need to involve the supply chain, need to be involved very upstreamly. In the Australian program was quite interesting in that aspect because we were involved at the very earliest stages of the bidding phase, and I think that's the right thing to do, because it takes time to be efficient when it comes to local content and transfer of technology. And if you want to do it properly, you need to start as early as possible. Then when you're in the country, you need to demonstrate your technical expertise, the value you can bring, and you need to share your experience with your customers and the final users. Lots of people will be involved in the program in France as well as in the customer country. Lot of new people will be involved also in the program. So you need to share and explain what you can bring, showcase your experiences and share. That's very important. When it comes to go to the country and to invest locally or to create a joint venture, for instance, before doing that, it kind of sounds obvious, but it's very important to study and understand the existing industrial capabilities of the country, and you need to understand all the how the industry works there. So you can focus on what really matters. When you will decide the business model you will apply for this the determined country. Then talking about the French industrial culture, we are very focused on engineering and technical knowledges. So that's a message I would tell to the final customer, to the navies. I think it's good to involve technical specialists because they will speak the same universal language, and that's the way the relationship will be fruitful. Talking about technical topics, it's something it's a universal language, so everyone speaks it. You don't need to speak a good English to understand technical things, and specialists, they like to share and work together. So then another point, talking about the defense industrial knowledges, they are very unique. And when we talk about the defense industrial base, lots of, like my colleagues previously said, there's a lot of SMEs involved in the supply chain, but even for the big corporation, they are very specific knowledges. They are very unique, and they most of the time rely on a few very specialized and experienced people. So it's very important to understand that, and it will be exactly the same in the final user country. So that's why it's very important to have a very long-term vision and a very long-term perspective when it comes to local content, because if you want to make it happen on the long run, you need to plan and manage things on a very long-term perspective. Another very important point to understand is that transfer of technology is hard and it takes time, so you have to be ready for that. Then to build up a defense industrial base and to avoid the one-shot effect, it's very important to have a very long-term financial and workload commitments toward the technology provider. If you want to, so that's what my colleagues were saying as well. You need to think about the through life support and even about the next programs. It took decades for the French industry to set up its defense industrial base. So the countries that are looking for local contents, they need to plan things on a very long-term perspective and understand that if you want to maintain the competence, you need to invest. And then very, very important thing as well, it's the final user country, the shipyard, and the French defense industrial base. They need to work and plan things together. It's very important to sit around the table and to put everything on the table. And then what I can say also from my personal experience is that the French industry, when it comes to local content and transfer of technology, I haven't seen so far anything equivalent in the world. You can the technology that is transferred and the local capabilities are unique. So thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and thank you very much to all of you for very complementary and I would even say converging presentations. I'm not surprised, and I've written several key elements regarding your presentation. The accent put on the quality of the relationship is more key than ever, and it's very much understood, I think, and it's not only, as you said, Mr. Carlier, not only talking about export only, and it's much more than that. And this quality is relying on several factors, the level of trust, of course, and the quality of the government relationship in the perspective of a strategic, long-term relationship. It's also the ability, and you just mentioned this in your presentation, but also in the others, about the ability to create a good, more than an excellent working relationship with the users that are more partners, in fact, in the relationship. I think this impact of this insistence on the local, you've all insisted on the importance of the local element and relationship, and the mutual understanding and mutual trust is so based on this. So I take from this it's a complex alchemy in the way partners are creating the relationship and the long term. It's much more than barely export. It's also a two-way street, and I understand that this is something important. You have reminded us that this relationship is mutually beneficial, of course, and even from a technical perspective. So I've written several keywords. You all mentioned sovereignty. You mentioned interoperability in some of those presentations, and long-term view is also an issue. The quality of the industrial base, I would say, also as the result of, in this particular case, a unique French existing ecosystem, I would say, for the DTIB, which is also key for as I would say almost as a model in a sense, and also the combat proven and then operational experience, which is very important. So all this is very rich, and I would like just to convey to you some of those questions that have been posed by the audience. Hopefully, I will try to cover the whole aspects, at least most of them. I have a question related to the SMEs. So let's start by the latest issue as being mentioned. And the first one would go to Thierry Carlier, I think. And there's a question that is raised about the impact of the Australian Naval program on SMEs, and should, in a sense, should French suppliers become Australian companies? You know, how can this evolve, and how do you see this kind of this is been asked by one of our listeners here. How do you see this perspective on the long term?
Thank you very much, Xavier, and of course I will let my colleagues. I think that what Vincent mentioned about the Issartel experience is definitely the goal of what can be achieved, and so I think it was quite a brilliant demonstration of what an SME can do, developing with partners, so maybe Brazil or Australia, as was mentioned. Yes, I noticed the question. I think it's we do recognize from French perspective that Australian expectations, they are high, they are fair. So it's totally normal that in the frame of such a big extent program, as I said previously, there is an expectation of definitely developing the Australian industrial capability, what is called AIC, in the frame of the program. We do think that for French companies, this gives huge opportunities because they can develop ties with Australian partners. This has to be addressed very early in the program, and it is also an opportunity because we are now in the course of the early design stages of the FSP program. And so Naval Group, with the different industrial stakeholders and with all the supply chain, is very committed to provide and to propose solutions. So I noticed that there was in the question, should French supplier become Australian companies? In a way, I think the answer is yes. Naval Group has already become an Australian company with Naval Group Australia. It's the same also for Thales, for instance. It has already been the case in the past. So for SMEs, of course, we can recognize it's more difficult to let's say to develop big industrial structures in the partner country. But as was demonstrated by Issartel, I think there are definitely opportunities. They can develop ties with Australian companies in the same domain, bid together. And this has to be organized on the whole course of the program and on the whole supply chain. So from French governmental perspective, we definitely support the approach. We think it's a big aspect of our partnerships to develop this kind of industrial ties, and we definitely think this is feasible over time.
Thank you, Thierry. And Mr. Carrié, maybe I have a follow-up question for you, and also you might answer this first part, of course. There is also, you mentioned Brazil, the case of Brazil, and one question was, how did the cost of equipment produced in Brazil compare to those produced in France, accounting in particular for investment possibly made in the training of Brazilian engineers and technicians? And we know that the quality of the relationship is also based on the quality of the partner, I would say. And of course, this is an investment. So how would do you have perspectives on this that you might share with us?
Yes, sure. Actually, as you're transferring technology, it's an additional service. So it would be obviously different from, I would say, buying a submarine off the shelf. You're buying transfer of technology, transfer of capabilities, the capability to carry out the through life support of your ship, for instance. So it's obviously it will cost more because it's an additional service. So that's the same for all the SMEs. It would be a little bit more expensive to manufacture and to the equipment in another country. Because it involves a lot of people. You need to have a back office. You need to train people. So the people, they have to travel abroad. They spend time in the mother company being trained, learning. You have also, it's something that I didn't mention in the presentation, but the learning curve, it takes time to be ready. Even in France, actually, when you recruit someone in France, it takes, in our industry, which is very long cycle industry, it takes 1-2 years maybe to have someone fully operational, and that's the case at all level. So you have to understand that. So it takes more time and it costs more money. But that's the if you want to have this capability, it's an investment. It's an investment.
That's precisely, I guess, the spirit of the question, which is for an SME, it's a very strategic issue. regarding the level of investment necessary to such big enterprises. So
exactly, and to complete my answer, that's one of the points that I was showing in the presentation. That's why you need to convince the final user. He needs to understand what is the value you're adding to the program, because for the countries it's huge. We're talking about huge investments, very long-term investments, so they don't want to throw money away. So you need to share your experience and to showcase. You say, open your doors. That's what we did for the Brazilian program. Some Brazilian Navy officer came to our mother company in France. We show them what we do and what the value we can bring. We took them along with us to visit the supply chain in Brazil, the company that we wanted to work with, so they could understand and the difference between what we have in France and what we wanted to set up in Brazil. So we did that all together, and it was together with the final user, but obviously with a Naval group. It's very important to put everybody around the table, and like I was saying, to plan things together and to do things together. It's very important.
Thank you. So I have another question related to this Australia we mentioned in several presentations, and so one of our viewers is saying that the program, the submarine program, may be under attack, major threat, they say, by the Australian left-wing politics and also by disappointed competitors. So the question is of course, will it survive? I wouldn't ask this from you. My question is, we mentioned the long term, and we of course faced in this activity with changes in politics, in local politics. The importance of local aspects are key. And how can this be factored in the equation, I would say, in all this, considering sometimes the uncertainty of some big programs like this? Do you have perspectives on this? Maybe Mr. Begous on this? Not particularly for Australia, but I mean as a whole, as an example as well.
Yes, this is why, and I will leave it to Thierry to carry on, but this is why the government-to-government aspect is very important, because we are really talking about very long-term relationship. We're just not talking about selling a product. So it is true that when you're talking about a program which is going to last 40, 50 years, it will undergo a lot of changes, political changes, but you must never forget what has triggered this program is also the geopolitical situation. And the geopolitical situation is such that it cannot afford changes on such a long program. So this is why we're not talking about, when we're talking about such a complex program, which for Naval Group is transformational. We are becoming a Franco-Australian company. You cannot talk about such programs like you would talk about programs which have a much shorter business cycle.
Yes, just I think that Massi explained it very well. So as he mentioned, it's a very long-lasting program. This is a cooperation which will last for decades. We already see between the Australian and French navies what is going on, or what I mentioned has also led to have very fruitful and more in-depth ties between ourselves and Australia, sharing, for instance, what we are doing with the Barracuda program. So it does give us to both sides huge opportunities. It's true, because we can witness this currently, that this FSP program is, let's say, subject to a high degree of scrutiny. But it's normal. It's normal because it's a very big program. We know that the level of expectations by our Australian friends and allies is very high. So this is also why we, from French side, so maybe Naval Group, maybe the governmental side, we are very committed in order to bring all the full rationale, what is needed. We have developed very, very strong ties at governmental level, maybe between the two ministers, between the two secretaries of defense, the two CHOTs of navies. And so we are very, very confident for the future with this program.
Thank you. Several questions have addressed the EU framework, let's say, so the question about the role of what could be the role of common guidelines, for example, agreed at the EU level. Do you see a more important role? And given the fact that the EU is thinking in terms more in terms of security and possibly long-term, more defense-oriented views, even if all this remains very, slow and based on a step-by-step approach. But what can be the relationship as seen from France with an EU perspective in this domain? Even if, of course, we're here in a very peripheral, I would say, aspect of the question. Thierry, maybe you have a perspective on this.
Yes, but perhaps I can try also to give a short answer to this one. I think that what actually occurs at a EU level is also a huge opportunity because the new tools, so the European Defence Fund, the Pasco, what we are also currently doing in the EDA framework. This will definitely give us to member states, let's say, a frame which was previously missing in order, of course, to fill our capability gaps, to develop cooperative programs together. So for this, let's say, really the EU, especially through the ADF, of course, is giving us opportunities which we have to gain benefit from. So I think this is currently the case. I think what has occurred, especially in the first stages of the European Defence Fund, so what we call EDIDP, has proven to be very successful. Also in the naval domain, because it's here we are in a Euronaval web conference. So there are lots of very good examples and really were proposed by different kind of member states addressing naval capability gaps. I think that from French perspective to this regard, we try to be as much inclusive as we can be with other partners at governmental level, but also at industrial level, trying to bring really wide consortia in order to bring the right level of solutions. It's also what we are doing in the Pasco framework. What we think is that Pasco, the Pasco topics we are proposing, we are trying really to develop interoperability at the good level, and so also making the link with what we can do in the NATO framework. So it's really still the beginning, but I think that with our naval stakeholders, so may it be a governmental or industrial framework, we really try to gain the benefit from these tools currently.
Thank you, Thierry, for this answer, which addresses many different questions that have been posed about the EU framework. Do you have, from your industrial perspective, do you have a compliment to add, or maybe from a SME? How do you see this framework, or maybe from Naval Group? Maybe Mr. Begous about this.
Yes. Obviously, as we know, the European industrial landscape is there are many companies, competing companies, and at a point in time, it is our view that this will have to be, I would say, simplified. But it will take a lot of time because we are talking about competitors bringing together, and based on our experience, it takes time to build trust, and we see it with our partnership with Thierry. It will take time. It's not something that you do overnight. And there was a mention about Germany as well. It is a bit more difficult, but eventually it will happen. But again, it takes two to tango, and you will have to have first the two governments agreeing, because we are talking about major sovereignty assets here.
Thank you. In some questions also, there's been a mention about the low costs, I think. And I think the panel as a whole demonstrated how much we're in a different, there's a different aspect between exporting some elements and creating a strategic partnership. And I think you answered this question in a sense, both during your presentation and in this exchanges regarding the quality and the necessity of the quality of the relationship. I think also you mentioned this strategic partnership at all levels, including government to government, also from an industrial perspective. And I was wondering about the enduring effects on the country itself, on the partnered country, in terms of academic skills, in terms of educated populations in different domains, by the way, and only do you feel like in your own experience that this has also benefited to helping, in a sense, some of the countries to rely on this perspective to develop themselves their own capabilities? I mean, from an intellectual perspective only, almost. Do you have this experience in a sense in your activities and in your recent interchanges with these countries?
But perhaps I can just try to give a very short example, which is the contacts we do have in the frame of the FSP program with Australia, because we mentioned, it was also mentioned by my colleagues, that of course this will lead to a huge ramp up in Australia, and especially for Naval Group Australia, in order to have the proper skills at the right time, because at the end of the day, we need to have a design authority in Australia being in charge of fully running the program. So this program, it's located in South Australia, especially in Adelaide. And I can tell you that from a governmental perspective, we had very good contacts with the Premier of South Australia, because he's definitely in charge, and he knows that over time he has developed a proper, let's say, a plan for the universities, for the different kind of schools, and really matching over time. So really this has also, it needs to really to be anticipated, and they are definitely doing that in Australia in order to be sure, to ensure that at a given period in time, they will be able to provide to the program the skilled and trained people who are needed. And this is, of course, fully developed in partnership with France, also from an academic point of view.
Thierry,
if I can say,
yes, please.
Yes, yes. It's a very interesting journey in terms of academical involvement for us as well. So to give you the example of what we did in Brazil, our factory is based on the university campus in the state of São Paulo, and we have a strong partnership with the local university. We work in partnership with the laboratory of the university. We recruit trainees, We have some people, they started as trainees in the company, and then they became a manager. They went to France, they were trained, so it's been a very enriching journey for them, and it's very good to carry out the transfer of technology involving young people, and there's lots of in many countries you can find that where you have a university campus together with entrepreneur initiatives, and so you put together the academic world with the industry, and it works pretty well.
So thank you very much for really again for this converging perspective, and so especially for helping us, I think, and all the viewers to better understand what this activity is about in terms of you mentioned the word, Thierry, completeness. I think this is a key word regarding the parallel efforts and activities and engagement, I would say, that are put into this effort. So I think we have reached, I speak of the control of our organizers from a technical perspective, but that we have reached the end of our webinar. I would like to thank all the viewers, of course, and for the questions, and hopefully I've reflected most of them to our speakers, and I would like to deeply thank Thierry Carlier, Massi, Begous, and Vincent Carrié for their very, very deep and illustrative presentations of these topics. So thank you to all. It's been a pleasure to moderate this very important, I think, very important panel addressing these very important topics. I would like to thank also Sojena, our partner, and organizing this, and Euronaval for this opportunity. And we will certainly follow up in our activities, and we will let you know about the analyzing and going forward in understanding better these issues. Thank you very much. Maybe if you want to add a final word, otherwise I thank you and I wish you the best and for the development of these activities. Thank you very much to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Xavier. Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.